Can you hear me? Is it loud enough? Yeah, but I'm just using a new device today, so I'm wondering how it's going to be like. Ah, that explains it. Right, right. بسم الله نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Okay, بسم الله نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Welcome everyone. Yeah, so last week we spoke about Arabia and what they believe. Inshallah, today we'll continue on that and focus on why Arabia was suited for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was suited for Islam to come to Arabia. Okay, what are the factors that made it why Islam became successful had a lot to do with the background of that society and their customs being relatively the same as what Islam brought. Okay, and that helped the Prophet's message, no doubt. Meaning, if it was revealed in another part of the world, it might have not been as successful. But with Arabia, yeah, I think you missed 2 classes in it, right? So the yeah, I'm fasting and my train of thought is disappearing. Right. So Arabia, the circumstances of that place made it possible for Islam to grow. Talk about that for a bit. In Arabia, there was no one government that ruled everything. Okay, even within Mecca, there were different tribes of Mecca. Now, a sign of a civilization is to have one ruling government. If you have more, it becomes crowded and everyone wants to have a say, and it's disunited in that way. So Arabia did not have one government, although it was known by the Byzantine and Persian empires that Mecca was the focal point of the peninsula. So that was known. But Arabia, when the Prophet came, he came to a disunited people, and that helped him because it didn't mean that they were united against him. When he came, some tribes accepted him, some didn't. But if it was just one government, if that one government opposed him, it wouldn't have been at all easy for people to accept his message. Yeah. Now, geographically, Arabia was suited for the coming of Islam because it was between two superpowers, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. So it had access to two, and by defeating them, Islam became known in the world. Yeah. So it was suitably placed to become an empire in itself. Arabs themselves did not have any sort of empire before the coming of Islam. They were a very largely uncivilized people that were busy amongst themselves. There were people that were busy killing each other, having battles with each other, never really looked outwards. So they had no history and no background, and this is what it's and their success came only from Islam. It didn't come from any other source. Yeah. So when people say Islam became powerful, it became powerful as an act of out of the context that Arabia had no history. Yeah, and it was Islam that gave honor to the Arabs, not that Arabs gave honor to Islam. Yeah, and this is what Umar radiallahu anhu said. He said, "We are a people that have been blessed and honored with Islam. If we leave Islam, we would become disgraced again." And this shows us that the success of the Arabs lies with Islam. And if they take any other society and culture in the world can take up other ideas. So communism, fascism, not fascism, or all these political ideologies that have been propped up and have been allowed to exist in places like Europe and Asia. These might have worked for them, yeah, or capital. Not saying that these things don't have a place in Islam, but I think capitalism and socialism, these are understandings of how to run a society and how to make one country prosperous. These ideas might have worked for certain cultures, but for Arabs, they would have never worked. And this is a lesson for Arabs today, that if they were going to take their commerce as a way to become wealthy, or they were going to rely on their oil produce and to think that that would give them honor, that is not correct. Arabs can never gain honor except through Islam, because they have nothing else to give, really. They were an uneducated people. They didn't have these large structures. They didn't even have a calendar, right? They didn't know how to read or write. Most of them at the time of the Prophet, they were very simple-minded. Okay, they had good qualities, which again helped Islam grow, but generally they were looked down upon by other empires. They were looked down upon, and this actually came to benefit the spread of Islam later on, as we're going to see. So they had nothing in terms of the history. They had nothing written down. They were an illiterate people. They were people who loved poetry, and they were very eloquent with the Arabic language. And the pinnacle of the Arabic language existed in Quraysh at that time, but they had nothing in writing. They had no history. They had no history, and that is not a sign of a civilization. Yeah, civilization has history. It's written down, and it shows that if something is not written down, that things are they're not stable. Yeah, things only become written down when things are stable, and you have time to think and time to write. But the Arabs weren't like that. They were people who were busy amongst themselves and never thought, or never believed they would outpower any civilization at that time, and it was Islam that helped them do that. And nobody really conquered the Arabia, right? Because it was a land of desert. It's a land of desert. Nobody really wanted to go there. Alexander the Great, once he entered, he just said, "Let's just go back to Egypt." They didn't. Nobody fancied that place. Nobody wanted to be there. It was a dry, difficult environment to live in and to prosper in. So when Islam came, it didn't have any outward attack. It didn't have a civilization that was attacking it immediately. So it was allowed to grow until a power was achieved in some way, and that helped them cross the borders of the Byzantines and Persians. I said here, if Islam was given to the Romans, it would have been difficult to spread, and that is because the Romans had a culture, and they were very sophisticated people. one of the things about Arabs is that, as I said, they're very simple. If you just told them something and they were convinced by it, they would just take it. They didn't question it. There were no philosophers in Arabia at the time. There was no there wasn't a sense of where's your proof for things. It was just if you said something and storytelling was popular, okay, and people rarely question things. But if you brought Islam to the Romans, they would have said, how does this work? How does this work? They would, and you need and who are the first people to accept religion generally? They're the simple-minded folk. That's just true. Okay, simple-minded people tend to just have a deeper connection to faith than people who have questions. Um, and that is why Imam al-Razi, rahimahullah, he said that you should have the iman of old women, of ajaiz, because old women do not question anything. Their faith is just, it's not blind faith, of course, but it's just taken to heart and accepted. There was a famous story. Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi is a famous scholar in Islam, somebody who wrote in tafsir especially. Um, he was like a giant of an intellectual, but he once was entering a town, and when he walked through it, people started, and he had students behind him, and people were impressed by him, and they started following him, and he was going to this place to teach, and people were following him, and he started to have a large crowd behind him. And an old woman came out of our house, and she said, "Oh, who's that?" And a man who's next to her, he said, "Oh, you don't know who that is? That's that's Fakhruddin al-Razi. He wrote 50 proofs for the existence of God." And the woman said, "Well, if he didn't have 50 doubts, he wouldn't need to write 50 proofs." Yeah. And so Imam Razi, when he heard about that, he was impressed with. He said, "Have iman like this old woman, who's just basic iman," and that's what the Arabs had in the beginning, and more people came into Islam in that way, and that was easier for the Prophet. And the Prophet, of course, was the first to unite Arabs. He was the first to unite all Arabs. Nobody had done that before. Even within Quraysh, people think Quraysh is just one tribe, but even within Quraysh, there are different tribes, mini tribes, sub tribes. Yeah. So the Prophet was the first to unite the Arabs, and that came about because, again, they were simple-minded folk, and it was easier for them to accept the religion. Right. As I said, when Arabs were fighting within each other, and another way that helped Islam grow later on was the internal conflicts that were happening made others never assume that they were coming. The Byzantines would have never assumed Islam would spread to in their land, and nor did the Persians. Okay, that just never happened. So, and that took them by surprise. Okay, so they weren't prepared for it. It's like if I told you a country like Ghana in 20 years' time or 40 years' time will become the superpower of the world. You would never believe me. But that's how really the Byzantines saw the Arabs before the Prophet came. That there were people interlocked with their own issues. They were weak, separate, divided. They didn't have any structure, nothing to build on. Right? So that they never prepared for the coming of Islam. And when Islam did come and take over them, they weren't prepared. Mecca was the site of the first universal religion. Okay, so it's befitting that Islam came out of Mecca. Abraham, who is followed by the three most significant religions in the world, okay, it was befitting that Islam came from there. So it gave it a good source of a good context, good origin in that sense. Yeah. So that allowed people to accept it more easily because Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was from there. The Arabs were simple people, yeah, as already said. They weren't influenced by philosophy and complicated religion. Very simple, very simple-minded, and that allowed Islam to be accepted by the vast majority very quickly. So the Arabs were used to simpleness, and so it helped when Islamic conquest came about. Okay. What I mean by that is the way their lifestyle was very simple. What they carried around was not much, and they were able to live with scarce resources for a long amount of time. Um, and even their horses were, the horses were the best horses, and everybody knows that Arab horses are the best horses because they're very fast. They can travel a long distance in one time. Okay, so the Arabs. So when they came to fight the Byzantines in Syria, they could the endurance of the Arabs was outweighed the endurance of the Byzantines. The Arabs could fight with less resources, okay, but they were very efficient. But the Byzantines and the Romans and the Persians, they were used to luxuries, and they had to have a source line for everything, okay, and that pulled them down. Okay, so Arabs, if you cut the water off, they had the endurance to um, they had the endurance, but for Byzantines that would have killed many of them. Another attribute Arabs have was bravery. They were just very brave people. Okay, and pride sometimes is a good thing. Okay, to have pride in something, like we should be proud to be Muslims, and you should be proud to be a country if it's achieved something good. Yeah, nationalism comes into being. There's a difference. And nationalism could be standing up for your country even if it's done wrong, and that's wrong. Yeah. But the Arabs had pride in themselves and their good qualities, and that's a good thing. And we should have that. That's not. Islam didn't come to suppress that. So whether you're Pakistani or Arab or Asian or Chinese or American, British, Brazil, Islam didn't come to tell you that you should forget about where you've come from and the ideals and the good models that you were brought up with from that country, because there are things in one society that might lack in others. There are things that other non-Arabs have that Arabs just don't have. Okay, and people should be proud and happy about being born in cultures where civilization does exist, and that's just a fact. Yeah. But the problem lies is when you feel proud about something which you didn't necessarily, being proud of things that harmed others, for example. That's not something to be proud of. So Arabs had qualities, bravery, generosity is just known even now until, well, I don't know the bravery, but with generosity, they're just known to be very generous people, and that, yeah, and that's not the case for every civilization. So that helps. If you're brave, you can stand up for yourself, and that's what and Islam benefit and people. Islam spread, and that was one of them. That Arabs were brave to enter the battlefield. They went in Battle of Badr, which we'll come to after some while. But for 313 men to fight 1,000 of their better equipped enemy, that that had to have some sort of bravery. There was tawakkul, of course, that help and victory is from Allah. Allah promised it in the Quran, and the Prophet was with them. But this element of just being brave was just critical, and Arabs had that. Another attribute Arabs just had at that time was their honesty. If they gave you their word for something, if they took an oath, they took that oath very seriously. And for someone to break an oath back then would probably mean being disqualified from the tribe or being killed. So honesty, saying things clearly, not being sneaky about things, that was something they prided themselves on, and they saw as a very good quality. And again, why the Prophet ﷺ was respected before he announced his prophethood. Sadiq al-Amin, the honest one. Okay? Honest and trustworthy. And those were qualities that were instilled in that culture before the Prophet came. So yeah, so they were sincere to their oaths. If they made a contract, they stuck to that contract, and that helped the Prophet later when people gave him their word and their allegiance, that he didn't have to worry whether they'd fulfill that allegiance or not. Okay. With again, another quality that Arabs had at that time were they were the best horsemen. They knew how to control the horse and ride the horse better than anyone else. They had the best horses, and we know this because even from a theological point of view, because the Prophet ﷺ praised Arab horses. Okay, he praised them in many hadith, and Arab horses are still, they're bought all around the world for a large amount of money. And they're not only for their speed, but as I said, their ability to travel massive distances without stopping. And they had the best riders. They knew how to control and ride the horse very well, and that helped the Prophet. That helped Islam later on, because Islam had to go and conquer places like Egypt, North Africa. You just had the people in those places. The Byzantine Empire that existed wasn't ready wasn't as skilled. So if you have more skill than your enemy, you're more likely to beat them. Another aspect that our Arabs had, which was an advantage for Islam, was the Arabic language, which was a Semitic language. So it was a language of people who followed the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And that helped Islam because the Quran came in Arabic and it wasn't refuted, right? It was accepted and it was respected because it was a language of people who followed Ibrahim alayhi salam. And of course, one advantage of the Arabs and of the Prophet being from Arabia was that he came from the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Ibrahim alayhi salam said, رَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Ya Allah, send a prophet from them who would teach them the book and wisdom, and he'd be able to purify them. So Ibrahim said, send a prophet from them, and from them came the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So only one prophet came from Ismail. So Ibrahim alayhi salam had two sons, yeah, Ishaq and Ismail. Every prophet came from the lineage of Ishaq alayhi salam. Ishaq, and then Yaqub, and from Yaqub came all the prophets. And we give this, and we recognize this because we're told this. Right? The Arabs weren't people that claimed things for themselves. If it wasn't, right? They were honest in that sense. And the only prophet to be sent from the lineage of Ismail was the Prophet Muhammad. And the Prophet said, I am the answer to Abraham's dua. And he said, I am the good tidings. أنا بشرى أنا بشرى المسيح ابن مريم أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. The Prophet said, I am the good news that Isa alayhi salam gave. And Isa alayhi salam, from the Quran, he said, there will be a prophet that would come after me called Ahmed. Yeah? And in the Bible, many Muslim theologians have picked up on certain sentences that they argue it refers to when Jesus said, "I'm going to leave you for the next one to come," and Muslim scholars interpret that verse in the Bible to refer to the Prophet Muhammad. Christians might differ, but that's what Muslim theologians say. Right, let's start then. So the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's talk about the Prophet's parents. I don't think there's much point talking about. All we need to know is that he came from the lineage of Ismail alayhi salam. To go on and talk about the names of everyone in the line of chain of his family train until Ismail alayhi salam, although it's recorded, I don't think it carries much benefit. Although we should have some rough idea, right? But the Prophet's parents themselves, we know very little about them, not that much. And the reason for that is that they were actually very young when they did get married and when they passed away. Yeah. They were born before the Prophet ﷺ was known to be a prophet. Of course they were. I mean, they died. Of course they were born before. They died before the Prophet ﷺ was known to be a prophet. So, as I said, we don't say the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet at 40, of course. Why? Does anybody know? Remember? We don't say the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet. Why is that? That wouldn't be correct to say the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet at 40. We say he announced his prophethood at 40. Anybody know why? Because I think we mentioned this in first or second class. That when the Prophet was asked, when did Allah make you a prophet? He said, Allah made me a prophet between the time when Ibrahim alayhi salam was a body, and between that and between the fact the soul was put into him. So that period. So the Prophet was asked when he became a prophet, and he said, I was made a prophet between when Adam alayhi salam was a body and the soul being put into him. So before humanity, Allah created the Prophet ﷺ, and He made him a prophet. Yeah. And so his soul, although his body wasn't existent, his soul was in existence. Yeah. So he's a prophet before humanity. So we don't say the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet at 40. We say he announced his prophethood at 40. Anyway, that's a side point. So one of the reasons we don't know much about the Prophet's parents is that they passed away before he declared himself a prophet, and it's after he declared himself a prophet, especially during the times in Medina, where we know a lot about the history of Islam. So the Prophet spent 53 years in Mecca, and then another 10 years in Medina. Yeah. If you are going to write about what we know about these two periods, of Mecca and Medina, most of it would have been under Medina. We know more about the Prophet and his life and um, his mission during the time in Medina than we know about 53 years of his time in Mecca. Why? Because in Medina, Islam became established. It was established as a state. Yeah, so people could relax and actually write and think about these things, and things will start becoming recorded. But nobody's going to learn history when you're being dragged on the streets of Mecca, being tortured, like Bilal radiallahu anhu. It's very difficult to record specific incidents and, and sayings of the Prophet when things are very difficult, because people have got other things to worry about, their life. Yeah? But in Medina, that didn't become an issue anymore. Muslims were safe, so they could sit and really and have a clear head to remember the sayings of the Prophet and remember the incidents that happened in his life. Is that clear? So we know very little about his parents because they came very early on. When the Prophet moved to Medina, he was 53 years old. And everybody would have been 53 years older than older since the death of his parents. So who's going to remember details 53 years on? It's just not going to happen. Okay? So as I said, when Islam is stable and powerful, it's easier to record narrations. Abdullah radiallahu anh. So when he passed away, so Abdullah was the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was called Abdullah. He was an 18-year-old man when he married Amina. Now Abdullah was from Banu Hashim. Now, as I said, Quraysh is the kind of umbrella, the big tribe of Mecca, but under that there were sub-tribes, and one of the sub-tribes was Banu Hashim. His father Abdul Muttalib, Abdullah's father, he wanted to get Abdullah married when he was 18, so he chose a woman from Banu Zuhra tribe, again another tribe from Quraysh. Banu Zuhra, and that woman was called Amina. She was also 18, and she was the daughter of a man called Wahab. Amina bint Wahab. So Abdullah, son of Abdul Muttalib, his father picked Amina, the daughter of Wahab, from the Banu Zuhra tribe to get married. Clear? Now, when they got married, the marriage didn't last that long because Abdullah and Amina only spent 1 week together. And when they got married, it was before the caravan season. Yeah, caravan season is when the caravans start departing from Mecca and headed to Syria for trade. And that happened, during the cooler months. So they had periods to do that. Abdullah was a tradesman. he was a merchant. So after being married to Amina, he left her a week afterwards, and he headed towards Syria, and they never met again. SubhanAllah, they never met again. Now, one thing about Abdullah was that he was known to be a very handsome man. Of course, he would have been. He is the father of creation, of the greatest of creation. So he would have been, and he had a special light on his forehead that was recognized by everyone before he married Amina. And the young women of Quraysh, they were very flattered by him, and they all suggested to him for marriage, and they all wanted to marry him. After he got married to Amina, in that 1 week when he walked in the streets of Mecca, that brightness on his face disappeared, and it left him. And they stopped following him. And he met one of them, and he said, why do you stop? Why have you stopped pursuing me? You never stopped before I got married. And they said, well, you had a light on your face before you got married, but now it's gone. And we understand that to be the light of the Prophet ﷺ, okay, that entered Amina. Okay, it left Abdullah and it entered Amina radiallahu anha. And this is why when we describe the Prophet ﷺ as nur, as light, it is a reference to that. Many we read this in the Shama'il. Some of the companions said he was even more beautiful than the moon, more light than the moon. What did they even mean by that? That's that light. Yeah? That's that light that traveled from Abdullah, his father, to Amina, and who came out of Amina, the light of the Prophet. Now, when Abdullah went to Syria, when he came back, he became very ill. Yeah, there was a fever. He became very ill. When they came to Yathrib, now Yathrib is of course the name of. Mic's off, please. Thank you. Mic's off, please. Yeah. So when Abdullah was coming back from Syria, heading to Mecca, he stopped. He became very ill. So he's told his caravan, "You go and complete the journey to Mecca. I'll stop here. I'll stop with my grandmother who lived in Yathrib, and I'll get better and I'll join you and I'll get back to Mecca sometime." So his grandmother was in Yathrib, and that was interesting because it allowed a connection to be built. See, Allah is working here in under, you know, in my words are not coming out. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is working in the background here, setting the scene for the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yathrib contains family members of Abdullah. Okay, so that allowed the people of Medina to sympathize with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he wanted to come, when he sought protection in Medina. Are we understanding here what's happening here? So everything was building up for the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he stopped at Yathrib, and he stopped, and Abdul Muttalib's mother, so his grandmother from his paternal side, she looked after him. When his caravan arrived in Medina, Amina was really very excited to see him. Of course, they're a new couple, a young married couple, and she obviously wanted to tell him that she was pregnant. She must have saw early signs of pregnancy, but she was told that Abdullah stayed with his family members in Yathrib and he would come back soon. That was the first news, and then the next news she had from him about him was that he had passed away, that he had died in Yathrib because of sickness. And she obviously was distraught. This is a young woman that at 18 years old, newly married, the best time of her life. She was, happy, excited. She had this amazing man of Abdullah, okay, who was working. He was somebody that a lot of women wanted to marry, but she was distraught. She's lost her husband, and now she became a widow. Not only a widow, but pregnant also. All right, so a pregnant widow, a very difficult time for her. The Prophet 9 months later was born in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. The Prophet was born in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. Amina radiallahu anha during her pregnancy felt pain, but Allah took that pain away, and inshallah if we get time to speak about that next week. Amina did not suffer what other women suffered. Yeah, and that was because of the blessing who she had in her womb. And Allah made not only her pregnancy easy, but even when she was about going to give birth, it was easy for her. There's one narration that says that when she was about to give birth, she saw the women around her as tall as palm trees, and she asked, "Who are you?" And they said, "We are Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, and Maryam, the daughter of Imran, and all the rest of these women are from the hors of the maidens, the beautiful maidens of paradise, and we're here because of who you're going to give birth to." And she said a light came, and a light appeared from her that stretched as far as Busra, okay, in Syria, and that was a sign, okay, and we'll come to that. Yeah, and she said, I saw that I was given this. I saw a bird, a white bird, kind of soothing my heart with its white wing. Okay, and that took all my worries away from me before I gave birth. And she was told that you are going to give birth to this great, either in a dream or an angel told her. We don't know, but she was told that you are going to give birth to the greatest of creation. What an honor Amina had. What an honor she had. Yeah, not everyone, you know. The Quran said to Maryam alayhi salam. The Quran said, "Ya Maryam, inna Allah wa qalat al-malaikatu ya Maryam inna Allah astafaki wa tahharaki wa astafaki ala nisa'i al-alamin." Oh Maryam, Allah chose you above all other women of the world. Yeah, so that's Maryam alayhi. Imagine the status of Amina radiallahu anha. Yeah, the mother of the greatest of all creation, the most beloved creation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet was born in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. We know that he was born on a Monday because later on the Prophet was asked, "Why do you fast on a Monday?" And he said, "I fast on a Monday because I was born on a Monday. Yeah, and I want to thank Allah for that blessing, and I want to be born on a Monday." He was born on a Monday, so he fasted on a Monday. He said, "Also, revelation started coming to me on a Monday also." How old was he? So what year was he born? Well, he was born in the in the year of the elephant. Yeah. There's an interesting hadith that Imam Tirmidhi narrates. Something called Khubayth ibn Ashyam. Yeah, sorry, Khubayth ibn Ashyam, radiallahu anhu. He was a Sahabi. Uthman, radiallahu anhu, asked him, "Who is man akbar? Who is older? Who is not older? Akbar could mean older. Who's older, but it could mean who's greater. So who's akbar between you and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" And Khubayth said, this is the adab of the Sahaba. He could have said, he is older. He could have said, "I am Akbar. I am bigger than the Prophet," which is true because it would have mean he's older, and that's a fact. But Khubayth, it didn't say that. You know what he said? He said, "The Prophet is bigger than me, but I was born before him." Yeah. So the Prophet is bigger than me, but I was born before him. Meaning, he's bigger than me in status, but I am older than him in age. And Khubayth said, when I remember when I was younger, I was taken out of Mecca, and I saw the excrements or the dung of elephants in the outer parts of Mecca. And what does that mean? That means the elephants had already came, and they already left. Okay. And this is, of course, the story of Abraha who came to and wanted to destroy the Kaaba. So when Khubat said this, he was saying that that I was older than the Prophet because I saw the leftovers of the elephants, and of course the Prophet was born in that year, but he couldn't have the Prophet couldn't have seen it, but Khubat did. Hope that's clear. So in terms of our modern calendar, we think it's around 570 CE, after Isa alayhi salam, 570 years after. Now the oldest book of Sirah is Ibn Ishaq, yeah, and he wrote that the Prophet was born in 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year of the elephant. The only doubt we have is on this 12. We know it's Rabi al-Awwal, we know it's a Monday, and we know the year. The Arabs, again, this is a sign of the lack of civilization that existed in them in that time. They didn't call years by numbers. They didn't have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They named their years by incidents. Okay, so the year of the elephant, that was the year that the elephants came to destroy the Kaaba. Yeah, so that's how they remember years, and that's how they figure out history. So we know the year, we know the month, we know the day of the week, but we're not sure about whether it's 12, the 2nd, or the 10th. Okay, that we don't know exactly. The first book of Sirah to be written was Ibn Ishaq, and he said 12, but he didn't put a narration or authentic line of narration where he got that information from. And this is why many Muslims believe it's the 12th, because Ibn Ishaq said so, and that's why it's the most popular opinion. Okay, now many Muslims know this. Okay, 12th Rabi al-Awwal is the day of the birth of the Prophet. But in reality, we have different narrations from different scholars and even from the Sahaba themselves. I think Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said the 10th. That was his opinion. Okay, so from the Sahaba and from the scholars later on, they differed on this day, but generally it tends to be between the 2nd, 10th, or the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal. Please, mics off. The Prophet said in the hadith, when my mother was carrying me, I don't know why I repeated my mother again, but when my mother was carrying me, she saw a light from her until Busra in Syria. So he said, when my mother was carrying me, she saw a light that appeared from her until Busra. And this is an authentic narration. Until the Busra, which is a town, a city in Syria. And this was, of course, the light of the Prophet. Again, this is Allah showing the universe, He's showing creation, physical signs of the manifestations of the coming of the greatest of creation, and the biggest sign that the hour is coming. Okay? Why is Syria mentioned here in the hadith? Especially, why did the light reach Syria? Syria is mentioned because it is a blessed land. We know that Syria is a blessed land. Not only the country Syria, but the area around it, Palestine, Jordan. This is all blessed. And in Surah Al-Isra, it says, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. Allah says, exalted is the one who took his slave from at night from Mecca to Jerusalem, and which we blessed around. So we blessed Jerusalem and the Sham, the area called Sham or Levant. That is the area which is blessed. Okay, so it has that significance. It also suggests that Sham was to be conquered by the Muslims in the future, and the jewel of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire at that time, was Syria, and it was a sign that their reign was coming to an end. It was coming to an end, and many signs came. Also, we'll talk about this next week. In Persia, 14 Persian pillars of the palace of the king of Persia collapsed at the night the Prophet was born. 14, suggesting only 14 kings remained in that dynasty. Only 14 remained, and that would be the end of the Persian Empire. The fires of Persia in their temples, which lit for thousands of years, also stopped. It extinguished. Okay, as a sign that their falsehood was coming to an end. So palaces and many thrones of kings were collapsed and broke when the Prophet was born. Again, these are all metaphorical signs. These were all messages that not only is the hour close, but the end of batil, the end of falsehood, was coming. And another sign was the jinns. The jinns were often, they could go and they could kind of listen to the angels were saying in the heavens, but when the Prophet was born, jinns were stopped from entering the heavens. Okay, again, another sign that the Prophet was coming, and yeah. We'll talk more about that and its meanings next week, inshallah. There are many miracles in the Prophet's birth that he narrated himself, sallallahu the thing is, this is why the Muslims take the Prophet's birthday or the day of his birth very seriously, because it was the first sign of the coming of the hour. It was the first sign that falsehood was being taken away. Okay. If you have questions about the Mawlid itself, we might answer them next week. Right, yeah, okay, messages. Yeah, that's it. So inshallah next week we'll continue mentioning some miracles of Prophet's birth, and we'll talk about maybe his early childhood in Mecca, and maybe we'll touch upon the lady Halima Sa'diyah and the miracles she saw when she took him and suckled him back, took him back to her tribe of Bani Sa'd. Right, that's it. May Allah accept your fasts. Aqidah is on Wednesday. Yeah, you're more than welcome to join us then. Any questions? Yeah, you too, Adam. You too. Any questions? Everything clear? Nothing more to... Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Who broke the treaty? What treaty? Yeah, well, that's they did, but generally they were people who stuck to their oath. They broke Hudaybiyah out of panic, out of panic that Islam was aspiring out of their control. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. رمضان مبارك. We'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.